Hello, everyone. I can see that some of you are here. I hope you can hear me. The way this works, Jerry and Samantha, is that I can't hear you. If there was something I could do about that, I really would quite like to, because it's an extremely weird experience for me to be addressing myself like I'm David Koch on the television. But what I would love is if you could use the chat box. Samantha, well done, thank you. To say hello and just to let me know that you can hear me. And Jerry, there you are, fantastic. Now, Samantha, Jerry has sent me some questions. If you have any questions, you can use the chat box to do that. Otherwise, I will be answering, Jerry, your questions anyway. So I reckon we should wait until, say, 25 to 8, if that's okay with you guys, and then I'll start. So that's just another couple of minutes in case people are running late. Oh, okay, Samantha's going, right. I've scared you off already. You've realized that you've seen enough video of me, which I completely understand. Jerry, just to make sure you can hear me okay, which you'll have to type into the chat box, by the way. Wouldn't it be funny if you were at your end talking to me and not realizing it doesn't actually work that way? It's a very one-way thing, this. Well, not very one-way, it's an exclusively one-way thing. If you've seen that question there, Jerry, in the chat room about whether you can hear me, I wasn't saying anything for a while there, so I suppose that wasn't very helpful. Now I'm talking. All right, is that part of your streaming situation? Wherever it is that you are in a Telstra unfriendly spot? Okay, so it still says Samantha is here. I hope that's true, Samantha. And it says that you're here, Jerry. I hope you can hear me now. I'm going to start by answering Jerry's questions. So, firstly, I was going to introduce myself then, but theoretically, you've all been watching a horrible lot of video of me. Fantastic. Okay, good, Jerry. Yeah, so you've seen a lot of video of me. I don't really need to introduce myself. I'm brushing something off my shirt and realize it's actually on my monitor. So, okay, it's going very well technologically so far. So some of you, well, all of you will get this by video. Some of you may have been unable to come today and will be attending by video, by late videos. So to give you some context, Jerry has sent me a few questions. Samantha, I'm not sure if you're still here. The system says you're still here, so I hope that's true. But I'm going to answer Jerry's questions, and just because they're Jerry's questions doesn't mean they're not going to be of general interest to all of you. So, Jerry, question 1. When you first sign in, you get 5 suggestions for people to follow. Presumably that comes from a mysterious algorithm, and it's a pointless exercise ever to try to become one of those 5. Yes, that would be absolutely correct. I mean, whenever I start a new account, when I'm running a course or something, I get asked if I want to follow Taylor Swift, Kevin Rudd, Tony Abbott. So I think the algorithm says, basically who's really popular in Australia right now as a verified public figure. So no, it's never going to be you, unless it gets sophisticated and it starts looking at your contacts because your friends have uploaded their contacts, and then it says, "Oh, hello, you two know each other." But there's no campaign that you could run to be one of the chosen 5 to follow. If you stop following someone, are they alerted to it? And does Twitter etiquette mind you doing that? That's a really good question. Twitter itself doesn't tell people that you've unfollowed them. However, people can use services that will alert them when somebody has unfollowed them. And etiquette-wise, it's a tortured area, because you have there's certainly software out there, for instance, that when you were unfollowed, this software would automatically send out a message saying, "This week I was unfollowed by @rule17 and @whoever," which I thought was a strange feature to enable. I suspect in the mind of the person turning it on, or the person who designed the software, it's a way perhaps of embarrassing the person who unfollowed you by saying, "I noticed." To me, it made you look like a total loser, because you were telling all of your other followers exactly who had chosen to unfollow you that week. A strange choice. In terms of etiquette, sure, I think if people notice and they know you, they could be hurt. So, for instance, I used to teach courses through a company here in Sydney, and its founder, I noticed, unfollowed me, which I thought was a really weird thing to do when you were one of their presenters and you presented their course. It seemed quite an odd thing to do, and I must say I did find that a little offensive. So yes, it depends on who you are to the person that you unfollow, but Twitter itself doesn't go out of its way. So somebody's got to go out of their way to decide they want to know who's unfollowed them. Jerry, you say, "My fear in engaging enthusiastically with Twitter is of becoming a victim of one's own success. How on earth can you possibly engage in conversation with 10,000 followers? Don't a lot of questions ultimately go unanswered and thus cause more offense than if you hadn't engaged with that number of people in the first place? Or is it simply a balance of overall positive effects versus some negative individual negative effect in which there is bound to be some attrition?" Okay. Plug me down. I thought I might have to give up and join you for the second webinar from the city. Okay, Jerry, I'm just going to type in the chat box to Jerry here to say, understood. You will get a video version. Okay, so Jerry, I'm going to carry on answering your questions, although ironically, you're leaving. I mean, this has been a challenge with the webinars for the ASA so far, because the purpose of the online learning is in part to help the ASA reach people outside the metro areas where the courses are traditionally run. But of course, for some people, I understand that the internet is not necessarily very good out there. I live in the inner west in Sydney, and I recently had internet wasn't very good right here in the city. And I use Optus for a mobile phone, and frequently we couldn't get a signal here. Victim of your own success, 10,000 followers. Questions that are thrown out generally by people to, Twitter, to your 10,000 followers, somebody might ask a question. Well, they're not going to be offended if they've asked a question of their followers in general that you specifically didn't answer, because Twitter works as a sort of stream. It's understood that sometimes you're there and sometimes you're not, and that you're not going to go back and scroll through everything that's ever been said to see if there was a question. If people directly address you, then that will show up in your mentions, send you a notification about it. So it really depends in a way on who you are and who they are. So to give you a personal example, I saw a great piece of content marketing from a wine shop in the UK. And I really liked it. And the video was embedded in an online magazine that I was reading, and I wanted a link to that video. And I tweeted them and asked for a link to that video. So, you know, here's me tweeting a company and asking for a link to their advertisement. That's how enthusiastic I was about their stuff. And they didn't reply to me. So I'm a bit miffed. So I think there's a balance. But on the other hand, if you're Stephen Fry and you've got multiple millions of followers, people have to understand you can't reply to everything. But that said, I think you're right, Jerry, that there are people who are going to be offended anyway. You know, I still remember writing to the radio critic of the Daily Telegraph in the 1980s on my typewriter and asking her a question and being annoyed that she didn't write back. And that was in the days of, you know, of course, before, you know, email. So she would have had to, I don't know, pull out a pen and actually write me a letter, put it in an envelope, put it in a stamp or type one. And I'm still slightly miffed. It depends on the person, you know. And so I think you put it nicely there that it's, you know, rough with the smooth. Samantha, if you are still here, feel free to ask a question in the chat box, and I will answer it. And in the meantime, I'll carry on going through Jerry's question. So I think that's the thing, Jerry. You know, better to be successful and be a victim of success and maybe offend some people but have achieved this level of success than to not get the exposure if you think you can get up to 10,000 engaged followers. What happens if a hashtag you choose is already being used? It's a really good question. And again, it depends on volume. So for instance, the Sydney Writers Festival uses hashtag SWF and then the year 2014 for this year, for instance. Last year, certainly in 2013, the Singapore Writers Festival used exactly the same hashtag. But the two events weren't on at the same time, and you know, that's just the way it is. And you will see that with some hashtags, particularly ones that use a, you know, an acronym or initialism, you know, like SWF. Because I think I looked it up at the time, and then I think there was the Southwest Federation of Surgeons or something who were using it as well. So provided people aren't all using it at the same time, then it doesn't really matter. But if you're hoping to take ownership of it, like, you know, for instance, you know, you're writing in a particular genre and you want a hashtag that is only associated with you, like what was that one that they were doing, a meal for a meal, where you took a photograph of your food and you hashtagged it meal for a meal or whatever, and one of the telcos was going to donate a meal to Oz Harvest every time somebody used the hashtag. Now that's fantastic, but then you absolutely want to make sure that nobody else is using the hashtag. But you can't stop somebody once you've created the hashtag from using the hashtag themselves for whatever reason they want. Nobody owns a hashtag. I imagine that will come one day, you know, when Twitter will say, well, if you want to hashtag something, you know, Toyota makes me smile, hashtag Toyota makes me smile. I could see them selling that to Toyota, and, you know, Toyota can control who uses it, but difficult. Okay, so Jerry says, my book, Rescue Pilot, is about to be published. I want a book, lots of publicity, a book identity with lots of publicity, rather than an author identity, because I have, you know, I want privacy. But I'm writing a second book, which will be called Film Pilot, following your advice that going from Taylist 10 to Taylist 11 would have little or no effect, and that the shorter the identity, the better. I'm thinking of starting off as JGRP, then becoming JGFP at a later date. Please discuss pros and cons of that general thinking. Firstly, Jerry, I think what I'd say is that both of those initialisms are kind of difficult to remember. Like, I mean, I get it if I remember that you're going for Jerry Grayson Film Pilot versus Jerry Grayson Rescue Pilot. But that's quite a lot of overhead in my mind when I'm wanting to type that into Twitter. Ending point of view, if somebody retweets you, I mean, firstly, I'm wondering whether JGRP or JGG, whatever the two are available. You know, 4-letter combinations, even ones that don't spell anything, are in short supply. Also, from a branding point of view, if somebody retweets you, it doesn't really say anything about you, and it's definitely hard to remember. Because remember, when you're looking at Twitter and you see somebody retweet me, it's Rule 17. They don't necessarily click on that Rule 17 to see my picture or information about me. But they might remember Rule 17, whereas to remember JGRP, I've really got to remember Jerry Grayson Rescue Pilot. If I'm already following you and you change your name then to JGFP for Jerry Grayson Film Pilot, then I'll still be following you. But what if I'm not already following you, but I do kind of remember who you are? Then you've changed your name halfway through. So I think you need to think about the branding element. You know, to me, I'd rather just be Film Pilot or Rescue Pilot. And I get it, you're going to write 2 books, but you know, maybe there's something you can do in the heli pilot area that isn't connected, and have a bit of a brand. My gut feeling is that going into it with the strategic intent of starting with one name and then changing to another is convoluted. It feels complicated, and anything that feels complicated, I think, is worth looking at closely. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, etc., etc. Yeah, quite true. Assuming there remain only 24 hours in each day, how would you prioritize your social media activity across the many available platforms if you had only one purpose, and that was to sell books? Fantastic question. You need to profile your readers first and foremost. Where are the people who would be interested in reading your books? A, be most likely to be found, but B, the answer, of course, is, you know, at the very top is Facebook, because Facebook has 1.4 billion active members. So, you know, everybody's in Facebook. But sure, so, you know, that arguably would be, the answer would be spend all your time in Facebook. But where are they going to be most interested in hearing from you? Where are you going to reach more of them who are interested in hearing from you? So, for instance, your readers could all be in Facebook and they could all be interested in hearing from you in Facebook. But the way Facebook works now is that only 6 or of the people who like your page on Facebook and profile page, and I have a tail-list page. So if you imagine your author presence as the tail-list page, only 6% of people maximum will see something you put up on Facebook each time, unless you pay to advertise. So, you know, to put that in context, if 100 people like the tail-list page on Facebook and I put something on that page, only 6 of them will have that delivered to their newsfeed. All of the others can, you know, remember, oh, I haven't seen anything from Taylist for a while. I think I'll go over to Facebook, you know, and Taylist's page on Facebook. But that's the reality. So, whereas on Twitter, pretty much everything. Then there's the question of where is the content that you're going to have to fill a social media presence? What is that content best suited to in terms of a medium? So, for instance, if you're a film pilot in a helicopter and you have some absolutely amazing video, then YouTube might actually be the place where you would be, best off building a following and building an audience and, promoting your book that way. If you only had 24 hours a day, you see what I mean? Only a sort of fixed amount of time in a day to spend on it. So the question is, where is your audience? And yes, it's easy to say Facebook, but do they want to hear from you in Facebook? Or even though they're all in Facebook, they'd actually rather engage because, your medium is video and YouTube is best suited to video? Or do you have amazing aerial photographs and you could really have a kick-ass Pinterest board, for instance, and you're going to get a lot of people coming to the Pinterest board. And of course, there has to be an overlap. From your point of view, let's take Pinterest. There has to be an overlap between people who want amazing photographs taken from a helicopter and people who want to read a book written by the helicopter pilot about helicopter piloting or, whatever the book is about. So you're looking for those overlaps. Okay. Thanks for the course, which is very kind of you, Jerry. So, Samantha, it's just you and me according to this. Jerry has dropped out. So did you have any questions, Samantha? And I'm going to type. All right, I'll put that up and then I'll wait a moment. And if the answer is no, then I'll end the webinar. You should all get a link to the video. You probably all, I apologize, got a link to a video. It's just me sitting here typing something or sitting looking at the screen because I pressed a button that jettisoned the window that I'm using to chat to the people who are here. So I'll just give it a minute just in case Samantha is still here, but it may be that Samantha had to give up and the software is just saying she's here. This obviously we can all tell is making riveting TV. I'm just going to check my email. Sometimes people email me during the webinar to tell me something's going on. Okay. All right. Well, I'm taking it then that Samantha doesn't have any questions, and as Samantha is the only one left in the webinar, I'm going to hang up now. I'm going to have my dinner. I hope you're all enjoying the course. Oh, hello, Samantha, you're there. That was by the skin of your teeth. Yes, I have a problem coming out with tweets on a regular basis. Any ideas? I can tell you what I do and what a lot of people do is when I'm reading things that are of interest that I think will be of interest to people that I'm trying to reach through Twitter, I tweet them. Now, I mean, that sounds fast. What I mean is, the Sydney Morning Herald, when I'm reading that on my iPad, which I don't have my iPad here, but you all know what an iPad looks like, has the share this on Twitter button. So do most of the news sites. I read a lot of blogs, and I have them all come into a piece of software called Feedly. And Feedly has buttons in it that I can press to tweet things. So, I mean, I find, so that's my area. I mean, my area is a lot where I talk to people about marketing and online marketing and so on. So I'm reading publications and I have those things to say. I retweet things that other people say, or when I notice particularly good examples of, things that are in my area, then I'll tweet those as well as links to my. So I suppose it depends, Samantha, on who do you want to be to your readers? And if you're having trouble coming up with original thoughts in Twitter, so you don't have the sort of, the bon mot that you want to throw in of your own, which is entirely understandable, then I would start thinking about curation, because there's a lot of value that you can bring by saying, I'm going to read lots of things. In fact, I already read lots of things, and I'm going to bring them into one place, and I'm going to tweet them out to you. And even though you might already have read that article because we both read the New York Times, you might not have read this one because you don't read the Washington Post, or you didn't happen to catch it in the Washington Post. So that's what I do. Do you have, and then regular, there's also, you know, using something like Buffer. So in my case, I tend in the evening to go downstairs, watch TV, and have my iPad open, and at the same time be reading all these newspapers and so on and magazines. I use Buffer so that instead of tweeting things, so that, you know, between 8 p.m. and 8:15 every night, everyone gets who follows me, you know, gets 30 tweets from me and doesn't get anything else. I use Buffer, which we discuss in the course, to spread those tweets out. Yeah, okay. So Samantha says, I write children's books about animals and the environment, so I follow other blogs about the environment and comment that you think will be of interest to your readers. I mean, you know, children's books are interesting ones to me in terms of the marketing, because depending on the age of the children, you know, that you're writing about, for most of the children's authors that I talk to, the child themselves is not the one who has the power to buy the book. So your audience in social media is really, you know, parents and buyers of books for children, you know, like grandparents and aunts and uncles and people like that. So, you know, it might be a question of, you know, thinking about, well, you know, how do I become an interesting curator, for instance, of, you know, sources of information about, you know, the environment and animals, and therefore build up a following of people who might coincidentally, or who, you know, inevitably will coincidentally be uncles, aunts, you know, parents and buyers of books for children. Because, you know, if you've built up a, you know, people are following you because you're engaging in conversations about the environment and animals, and, you know, you're authentic about that. And you occasionally drop in a tweet saying, hey, I've got a new book, or, you know, this reminds me of the, you know, what I wrote about in my book, then that's entirely fair enough, as long as that doesn't dominate your feed. I hope that answers the question. And I think, you know, as well, for, you know, not just churning out crap. There's a guy I follow who just, I mean, he must tweet every 2 minutes, which is just extraordinary to me. And so he's, you know, he's, I mean, I would imagine he's paying people to just pull this, and it's relentless. I couldn't wait to unfollow him. Also, as a children's author, I don't want to be controversial just for the sake of it to get attention. So maybe just interesting things. Exactly. I mean, I think that's exactly right. There was a great book. They did it on, it was 99% Invisible, which is a podcast. If you haven't heard of it, apologies if you have already heard of it, and, you know, I'm teaching how to suck eggs. But it's the show that introduced me to, and I can't for the life of me remember the book, but it was the show that introduced me to 99% Invisible. And it was a guy who'd written a book because he wanted to go and see species that were becoming extinct. And I think he wanted to go with his child, so his child would see it. You know, and it was a really amazing, damn, I wish I could remember it, but the podcast was definitely 99% Invisible. And it was on there because the guy had turned the book into a stage show with original music and him reading bits from the book. And it was, you know, totally fascinating. And it was talking about how it used to be when sailors, I was going to say parked their ships, that's how much of a sailor I am, but when sailors anchored, just the sound of dolphins and whales lashing the side of the ship, because the seas were just absolutely chock full of marine mammals, and turtles, I think it was, or, you know, anyway, whatever it was just fascinating that we don't realize how sparse the planet is now, because of course we weren't around when it was abundant beyond even our imagination. So, you know, that kind of stuff would be completely fascinating. I mean, that's not about taking sides, you know, that's interesting facts, and, you know, what books have you read, you know, what was interesting, you know, what sort of factoid, you know, jumped out of a book at you. I think it's a muscle. I think reading something and thinking, I must tweet that, is a muscle. So for instance, you know, it's not just tweeting, I just read this book, full stop, or this is an amazing book. As you're reading the book, you're thinking, wow, that's amazing. I didn't know sailors used to have trouble going to sleep because there were so many turtles bashing into the side of their boats, you know, that sort of thing. I hope that helps. Did you have any other questions? I'm watching the chat, Eric. It's funny, isn't it? It's very dull. I feel like I should fill in the awkward silence, which isn't really awkward, but it does feel quite awkward in here as I deafen myself shouting into the webcam. I apologize. All right, Samantha, if that was your last question, you know, I really hope that helped. We've got a second webinar, you know, coming up. So obviously there's plenty of chance to, you know, think of questions and shoot me an email if you'd like me to answer them. That was I'm not used to appearing on my own tiny television show. Is it a no-no to put at? Is the more question coming? Is it a no-no to put at? That just says at. To put at what? Now I want to speculate on what the question was, which would be stupid. Ah, right, at bookshop, etc. If you want to say thank you, would it be annoying? I'm not sure I understand the question. On the whole, most people like being mentioned on Twitter, and the reason they like being mentioned on Twitter is because you mention my handle when you're tweeting something to your followers. Some of your followers might click on my name to see who I am and like it. So I don't think many people would find it annoying. I think if you're so popular, people are mentioning you all the time, and it clogs up your feed. Tough luck for being so popular, right? I mean, that would happen. I mean, if you were Tony Abbott, for instance, you know, your feed would be absolutely constantly clogged with people slagging you off, mentioning you when they're talking about you to somebody else. You know, your ears look like Tony Abbott. That's going to show up in Tony Abbott's feed if you use the @ handle. So no, I think on the whole not, and I think, you know, particularly bookshops, you know, like all the exposure they can get. Does that help? I'm glad to say I don't watch these videos back. I'm hoping the content is good. I'd just be looking at my shiny bald head. Might need to get some better lighting in here, or tilt the webcam down a bit. Ooh, there you go. Yes, no, I'm not quite so low down on the screen. That's not bad. All right, Samantha. I think, Samantha, you are still the only one who's here. Yes. I mean, not everybody even signed up for the webinar, so I guess it's not. Oh, internet so slow. Next question, I'll email you instead. I mean, for oh no, not at all. That's not bad at all. No, I think that's very good. I think, you know, Dimmox would be delighted. You know, it's publicity for them. I think certainly you'd want to be mentioning it, you know, before you went. But no, I would find that irritating at all. You know, you could work on making the content, you know, a bit more interesting. Like, you know, if you were at Dimmox at a signing table or something, you know, it'd be fun to, you know, have a picture of yourself, maybe with one of the readers who came up to have their book signed, and, you know, have the picture with them and say, you know, had so much fun at Dimmox today, you know, that sort of thing. So, you know, it's sort of, it's a thank you, but it also contains content for people who aren't you and aren't Dimmox. I'm sorry your internet's slow. I guess that, yeah, that does seem to be a problem for a lot of the people who are taking these webinars. Because also I have the ability to share my screen. So if somebody had a question that involved, you know, it would be easier for me to demonstrate, then the video is good. But there is a possibility that, you know, potentially it would be better without video. I mean, if I So if I turn off my camera now, so you just get a picture of my big fat head. Fortunately, it's not as fat now as it was then. You know, it might speed up your internet if you're not having to download my video. Well, Samantha, it was really nice talking to you in this weird monologuing sort of way. And I look forward to at the next webinar. Thanks for coming to this one. All right, I'm going to stop the broadcast now, and I think that's going to dispatch the video in your direction. All right, thanks a lot. Bye.